Hello and welcome to today's webinar, RFP 101. My name is Gina Pappas and I'm the President of Albers Communications Group, and I will be presenting today's content. To give you a little bit of background about Albers before we dive in, for more than 15 years we've helped our clients by serving as a trusted partner, and we really rely on that partner relationship. We see ourselves as more than a vendor, and our team of experts have really built their reputation on being able to help our clients through integrated PR and digital marketing strategies, effective storytelling, which means finding those stories within your business that you may not be able to see because you're so close to it. Our news media expertise, we have several former journalists on staff who know the right people to pitch and the right angle to pitch to help tell your unique stories, and scalable solutions for organizations of all types. So whether your company is very small or very large, there is a PR and integrated digital marketing strategy that we can build to suit your needs in a customized way. As I said, my name is Gina Pappas. I'm the President of Albers Communications Group. If you have any questions following this webinar, please feel free to contact me. You can email me at gina@alberscommunications.com, follow me on Twitter at Gina Pappas, or connect with me on LinkedIn. Here's a look at what we'll be covering today. First, we'll go over what factors lead to the decision to issue an RFP in the first place. There are many things that come into play, and we'll go through all of those. The factors to consider as you're building your RFP, the background to provide about your business so that the people fulfilling the RFP have enough information to answer your RFP effectively, the must-ask questions you should ask of any agency who is submitting an RFP for your company's work, the time frame of the overall process, how to make a smart decision, and from there, how to effectively manage the agency and client relationship. So first, how do you decide you want to issue an RFP? You should absolutely issue an RFP if you've never utilized an outside agency. It's hard to know where to start. Word of mouth is a great way if you have colleagues in the business who have worked with agencies. It's great to get feedback from perhaps related industries that aren't direct competitors about what agencies you can work with. But there are so many agencies and so many possibilities, and each agency has a different focus. So casting a wide net by issuing an RFP can help you find the right fit for you. You should also issue an RFP if you're unsure of your exact needs. Again, sometimes you're inside your business and you're so close to it that it's hard to see the forest through the trees. So if you bring in a communications agency and ask them how they would treat or overcome your communications challenges, it will give you a much more focused idea of what tactics and strategies they're going to recommend to fulfill the needs that you may not even know you have. And if you're required to get competitive bids, several nonprofit groups are required to get a certain number of bids when it comes to issuing any type of work, whether it's a small project like a video or a larger project like entering an agency of record relationship. So you absolutely shouldn't issue an RFP if you fall into any of those categories. And how do you manage the process? So what should you do when you decide to build this RFP? Where do you start? First, you can seek out examples online. Depending on your industry and what you're looking for out of an agency, there are many examples you can find online on the things you should ask in an RFP, which we will also cover, but how to structure the RFP. So look at examples and see what's out there and see what's the right fit for your business. Also, identify a primary point of contact on your side who will be responsible for issuing the RFP, managing responses, answering questions, and owning the process of entering the RFP process. And then stick with a timeline. This primary point of contact within your business should set up a timeline, and you should stick with it. And that timeline should be forward-facing to the agencies who you're asking to submit on your project. And stick with it because it's only fair to your process. It's only fair to the agencies who are presenting that they would have a fair and transparent process in terms of timeframes. The RFP process is a commitment, and it's not something that should be entered into lightly by any business. you're committing to fully vetting all RFP submissions, which means you may have some that really aren't right for your agency or for your company. You may get submissions that are off target, but you need to give your due diligence to every submission that comes in, and you need to fully vet each of those submissions. You're also committing to entering a long-term agency relationship. PR fundamentally is built on long-term relationships. We always tell our clients it's a marathon, not a sprint, and it's something that has to be executed on a consistent basis in order for it to be effective. You can't fade in and out of PR. You can't fade in and out of a digital strategy. So when you're entering the RFP process, you're committing to a long-term agency relationship, and the returns you will see over time will be felt through all sectors of your company, not just the communications department. You're also committing to dedicating members of your staff to work with the agency. And that's not necessarily the point person who is heading up the RFP process. If you have a communications department, then you are committing in some way all members of that department to honoring and working within the agency relationship. If you have one person, you're a smaller company, and you have one or two communications people, you're giving a big chunk of their time to entering into that agency relationship and managing it. It should never be a goal of an agency to take a bunch of your time. The goal of an agency should be to take work off the plate of your communications people so they can focus more on internal goals and the things that they're best suited to do. So that's also a red flag you should watch out for in the RFP process. An agency shouldn't require too much of your time. Of course, in the upfront there are planning times and planning processes involved, but it should become a very smooth, seamless process as time goes on. Your communication strategies will help you achieve your goals, whatever they may be. So keep in mind that through this RFP process and finding the right agencies, you are going to identify your internal goals, and that goal may include increasing brand awareness. It could be challenging existing perceptions about your company and your business and what people think, and how do you want to turn that on its head? How do you want to change that? Or your goal may be establishing industry expertise. These are all things that communications agencies can help you do, and they're things that you need to identify in the RFP as your primary goals so that they can submit an RFP that is clear and on target, and we'll get into that a little bit later. So here is some of the background that you need to provide as the company issuing the RFP. You need to give them a general overview of the project. So what's the general scope? What are you looking for? What's the current situation analysis, and why you're asking at this time for an RFP? You need to give them the background of your company. This is one question that we always ask prospective clients, whether it's an RFP process or just a prospective client meeting. Tell us a little bit about your company. Tell us a little bit about the communication strategies you've used effectively or ineffectively in the past. So give them background that they need to understand the scope of the project and be able to deliver an RFP that's clear and what you're expecting to get. You need to tell them why you're issuing the RFP, and that goes hand in hand with the next bullet, which is the analysis of your current challenges. You're probably issuing an RFP because you have a communications challenge or a concern, or for one of those other reasons we mentioned earlier, but you need to tell them why you're issuing the RFP and tell them what your current challenges are that you're expecting them to help you overcome. You need to talk about the project scope and the expectations. So if there are certain things that you want or need out of this relationship, you need to be very clear about in the RFP. The RFP is really no place to be vague, but on the same token, you can't expect that the response is going to include free ideas. So we'll talk a little bit about that later as well, but you need to clarify the scope of the project and your expectations for the RFP so that, again, you're getting something that's targeted when it lands in your inbox. The required deliverables per submission, so give them what exactly you're expecting. Give them a list of questions that is very clear and that you can really help make a fully vetted decision once you see the answers to those questions. And then timelines for submissions and decision making. That's something that, as I said earlier, is fair to you and fair to the agencies submitting. So tell them your timeframes. Those timeframes may include when the RFP is due, when you expect to make a first round cut, any next steps, and we'll get into those next steps later and what steps you should take when you're issuing an RFP, but clearly lay out your timeline in the RFP as you're providing it to agencies for them to respond to. Here's an important note about budget. You do not need to provide your budget, but it may save you headaches in the long run. So often we have prospective clients who are afraid to provide a number because they're certain the agency will just run up to that number and not give them a fair bid. And I can tell you, at least from our standpoint at Albers Communications Group, that's not the case. But having an idea of your budget helps us determine what tactics and strategies we can realistically deliver before you get too excited or, on the other hand, underwhelmed by what is being proposed because the agency is unsure of your budget and wants to play it a little close to the vest. So providing a budget, providing even a budget range, can really help you narrow down who is in your ballpark and who isn't, and see what you would be getting for the money. So it just saves a lot of confusion later. So here are the questions you must ask when you're issuing an RFP. At a minimum, you need to know the background and history of the agency. And you may want to go so far as to say in 200 words or less, or give them, say 2 paragraphs to do that. So you want to be able to compare apples to apples when you get the RFP submissions. So it's a good idea to put some word restrictions on it so that they can really whittle down and you can see what they see as the main points and key messages that their agency can provide to you as far as who they are, their background, and their history. The scope of services they provide. So you want to understand what type of agency you're working with. And those services may include things that you aren't asking for. You may be solely interested in a media relations strategy, but it still is beneficial to know that the agency submitting the RFP offers a variety of other services, number one, so you can determine if there are opportunities for you to grow in other ways, if there are strategies they offer that you hadn't considered as part of the RFP, and also if you have people in your company who, for example, do multimedia and do video. Having an agency or hiring an agency that has video capability allows you to potentially enter an integrated relationship with your multimedia team and the agencies. On the other side of that, you need to know if, again, say you're submitting an RFP for media relations work. If media relations is a very small slice of what the agency does and they lean far more digital, then they may not be the right agency for you. So asking for scope of services is critical when it comes to issuing and writing an RFP. You also want to understand the experience of your staff. So you may get as detailed with this or as general with this as you would like. So if it's a small agency, you may want to see if you can get bios for all members of the team. If it's a larger agency, you may want to ask for just the core team. So it's all in how you word the RFP. Tell me about the account team. Please provide bios of the people who would be working on this account. And they will provide as much or as little as they want. But red flags to look for as you're the company issuing the RFP, you want to have one primary point of contact. So when you're getting submissions, watch that team section and see who they provide bios for and identify them early on in the process, because they will definitely be people you want to speak with in the interviews should they move on to the next phase of the RFP process. You should ask for work samples. And you should also ask for industry and competitive experience, So you want to understand their experience, say, for example, in the home services industry. And you may, if you're a landscaping company, you may want to understand if they have any experience with direct competitors. They may not have experience with other landscaping companies in your area, but they may have other home services experience. So it's good to understand if they have a niche that they focus on or if they serve a variety of clients and their advantages and disadvantages to each. But don't count an agency out just because they don't have related industry experience. That's certainly not a reason to close a door for an agency. You want to have work samples, so if there's something very specific you're looking for, say you're putting out an RFP for a video project, you may want to see examples of videos they've done in a certain style. Maybe they're graphic-based, maybe they're testimonial-based, maybe they're interview-based. So you want to see examples of what they've done. You can also sometimes find that just by looking at the client's or the agency's website. So consider that as well. How they will report metrics and ROI. This is one of the #1 questions that we're asked by prospective clients is how do you measure PR? How do we know what you're doing works? And it really is up to the client to determine what factors are going to make their business tick. So it may be ad value, it may be media impressions, it may be website analytics. So internally as a company, you need to determine what the important metrics are to you, and then you need to see what the agencies who are submitting on the RFP say about how they will report and see if there's a fundamental alignment of deliverables and what you have in common and what they're able to provide that's going to satisfy higher ups and justify the investment of hiring an agency. You need to ask for hourly rates and fee structures. Some agencies stair-step depending on who you're working with within the agency. The hourly rates may be different. So if you're working with a C-level person, they may be at a higher hourly rate than your day-to-day account person. A video person may be at a different hourly rate than a copywriting person. So you need to have a firm understanding of how the hourly rates work, what the fee structure is, how you will be charged, whether it's hourly, whether it's on a retainer basis, and what the total budget is for the project. You need to ask what they expect of you. When we're entering into a new relationship, for example, we really prefer to have one primary point of contact. We like to give people access to all members of our team, but we like to give our clients the same service. You will have one primary point of contact, but you will have access to the expertise of our entire team, which means we pull people in and out of the account relationship to help when needed, but you will always have your primary account team in place. It should be similar on the client side. You should have one or two people, a small team, who are managing the agency relationship and whittling down information to others or funneling it to others as needed. And then references. It's great to speak with people who the agency has served, whether current or in the past, to get an idea of how they work together, get an idea of the good, the bad, what you're getting into. So having agencies provide references as part of the RFP is something that you really need to include. The timing of the overall process, it's about an 8 to 10 week process. So you need to follow these time frames. You need to provide clear submission deadlines, including the day and time. So if it's going to be March 10th at 5 p.m., that's what you need to put in the RFP. Otherwise, you'll continue to have things trickle in. So give a firm date and time that you will be accepting submissions, and don't accept any submissions after that point. It just doesn't bode well for what the agency relationship would look like if they can't get the RFP turned in on time. Typically, it takes about 2 to 3 weeks to vet the first round of RFPs. Again, you're going to fully vet every RFP that comes in. Depending on how many come in, 2 to 3 weeks is a pretty fair time frame, and depending on how many people you have vetting that first round, and I would encourage you to either take a team approach to it or just have one person dedicated to vetting them, then it takes about 2 to 3 weeks to do that. Another 2 to 3 weeks to conduct interviews with finalists. You can either do this via Skype or another virtual meeting software, or if the agencies are local, then you can have a face-to-face interview process. And that typically takes another 2 to 3 weeks depending on how many finalists you have and just getting those scheduled with all of the key players. After you've conducted the interviews with the finalists, you should have a pretty good idea. So this is where the time frame shortens up a bit. It should only take about a week to make a final decision with your internal team. So based on those final interviews, again, you kind of know the right fit. If you don't, this is the time to ask clarifying questions, or if you're down to 2 agencies, it's time to dig a little bit deeper with both of them to figure out what the right choice is going to be. And then another week to notify who you're going to award the business to, and execute the signed contract. So at this point, there's no reason to wait. Get them on board, get your internal team on board, get the contract together, get it signed, and get started on the relationship. So how do you narrow the choices? So we just talked about the time frame of the process, but how do you go about narrowing down? What are the things that you need to consider when you're selecting a communications partner? You're going to appoint your selection team. It should include people from your marketing department and any C-level executives. If you have a chief marketing officer, for example, they should at least be looped into the process to whatever degree they want or do not want to be looped in. We suggest throwing out agencies that don't include all elements requested in the RFP. So you're going to issue a very clear set of questions, and if there are any agencies who don't answer those questions, I would throw them out because they can't follow directions from you at this stage. It doesn't bode well for the long-term relationship, or they're hiding something or don't want to disclose something, and it just is a bad idea. They need to be thorough. Obviously, agencies that don't use proper grammar, again, if you can't get it right in an RFP, you're not going to get it right in a piece that goes out to the public, so you have to toss those out. And like I said earlier, agencies that submit after the deadline. There's really no room for that in the RFP process. It's a serious process, and it needs to be treated as such by the agencies that are submitting on it. So anyone who does those three things, it makes it a little bit easier to get them out and narrow down your focus on the ones who have done all of those things correctly. Then do your online research. So you have a stack of RFPs that are good, that have passed the first wave in your hand. Google a little bit. Get on their website. Get on their social media pages. Look at review sites. See what people are saying about them. If video is something you're interested in, watch examples in addition to the ones they provided. Obviously, they're going to provide their best work in the RFP, but see what else is out there so that you're getting a really representative sample, and do your homework on them on the back end as your selection team. Ask any clarifying questions if you need help narrowing it down. If you're really struggling, it's perfectly fair to go back to agencies and ask them questions that you think are going to help you lead you to an informed decision. Conduct those face-to-face or Skype interviews with the finalists, and then contact the references as well. And that can all happen within that last week or two of the process. So you're spending 2 or 3 weeks conducting interviews with finalists. At the conclusion of those finalist interviews, it's a good idea to immediately call references and not try to save it for that last week when you're making decisions. It can be hard to get people on the phone. They may prefer to answer questions via email. So as soon as you conduct finalist interviews and you think they're a real contender, contact their references. And once you've made a decision to enter into an agency relationship and executed that signed contract, it can be a whole new world, especially if you've never had an agency partner before. So these relationships work best when your expectations are clearly managed from the beginning. And it's fair for you to set your expectations with the agency, and it's fair for them to set their expectations with you. For example, if you've never entered into a media relations strategy, you may not be clear on exactly how the media works or what to expect in terms of placements. And hopefully that's been pretty clearly conveyed within the RFP. But make sure if you have a specific goal about a specific publication or number of placements, that it's clearly conveyed to the agency. And if it isn't a realistic goal, then the agency needs to clearly convey that to you from the beginning so that you can meet in the middle and neither one of you ends up disappointed. The relationships work best when there is a main point of contact. Like I said earlier when we were talking about account teams, it really works best to designate one person from your communications team to take the phone calls, manage, be the primary person on the emails, perhaps CC the rest of your internal team when corresponding with the agency. And same thing, maybe there are people within the agency side who are CC'd on emails, but really it's the two primary points of contact working together on a day-to-day basis to get the elements of the RFP, get those wheels in motion. Relationships work best, like I said, you need to have access to the entire agency's team of experts when needed. So perhaps video isn't something that is part of your RFP initially, but as the relationship evolves, you learn that it's something that would be beneficial. So your agency should put their best video people on your team and on your project so that you're working well together and integrating what you're doing from a video standpoint with what you're doing from a standpoint of your other strategies. Collaboration. This is huge. You need to be able to bounce ideas off each other. It shouldn't be a dictatorship on either side. Agencies need to have a bit of creative freedom. They need to have the client understand the process and appreciate the process of whatever they're doing, but it goes for the client as well. The agency needs to respect the client's expertise in their industry. They need to be willing to learn from you as the client and soak up all of that information like a sponge so they can serve as an extension of you and as a partner more so than a vendor. Relationships work best obviously when both parties meet deadlines. So if you as the client promise to get contact information for somebody to your agency by Friday, be sure you're doing it by Friday. If agencies need to provide you with weekly reports every Monday on their strategies and ideas for the following week, they should be providing them every Monday. And this should be a red flag if it's not happening from very early on, but it needs to remain. Set on a regular schedule. We like every 4 to 6 weeks to sit down face-to-face with our clients and just have our meeting and talk about what's going on in their world. But we're definitely in communication daily between the meetings and the scheduled phone calls. We're in constant communication, but sitting down face-to-face or virtually is still invaluable. And you will need to address concerns immediately. So if the agency has any concerns, it's their obligation to address those with you very early on. If you have any concerns, you need to address those early on as well with your agency. That's all the content I have for you today. I thank you very much for your time. If you have any questions, again, please feel free to reach out to me via email. I'm happy to answer any clarifying questions about the RFP process and lend our expertise as an agency that has responded to RFPs, but also as someone who has helped clients construct RFPs for non-communications-based work. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to speaking with you soon. Take care.